But maybe a little bit first of all about the context that we live in here in the UK. So the UK is pretty much one of the most centralized countries in the world, certainly around developed countries, and that's a factor of a number of different things. So one, there's the physical way in which our states are structured. So we have a very strong central government. We don't have a federal system, although we're trying to struggle and move to that kind of more decentralized model. You can see that with the emergence of mayors, with the emergence of kind of regional parliaments in Scotland, in Wales, and in Northern Ireland. But it remains the fact that the vast majority of the real decisions that we have, so even the Greater London Assembly that we have here in London, we have a mayor, but the mayor's powers are actually very, very limited. And the vast majority of decisions are made by central government and pushed out. So we have this really centralized model of how we work the economy. The other real factor, the other real structural factor is the way that money's raised, and where money goes, power sticks. And the way that we raise money here in the UK is really a lot of central taxation that goes into a central organisation that we call the Treasury, and the Treasury then decides how to distribute that out into the economy. Like local authorities, our kind of more local layer of administration, have very few powers to raise money directly or raise additional money for specific needs. So we already have this kind of state. The way we've organized our state is already a kind of big factor in why we have such a centralized economy. But the other big trend has been this kind of economic philosophy that has favored scale and efficiency over some of the other things that we could be prioritizing in the economy. And it measures that efficiency is very much focused on money. So if we can make something more efficient in money terms, that is generally considered a good thing. And it ignores some of the other benefits that smaller local initiatives can have. And if you think of the economy as like a complex system, and it certainly is a really complex system, what I find most important about an economy is not the efficiency with which we put like inputs into the economy, and that could be money or raw materials, other things, or labor into which we get then an output that we so desire. So that's like the efficiency measure, like how efficient are you putting things in and then getting them out. But if we just focus on having things that are really, really efficient, what we have is really, really unresilient economies. And money is a really great example of that. So we have, over the last, really focused on the efficiency of money. So we have one type of money. That money has to do everything. We want it to basically enable as much throughput in the economy as possible. But when that one type of money stops working, we don't really have anything to fall back on. And so previously, the Bank of England would have reduced interest rates. We've now done that as much as possible. Then they would have printed some money, what we call quantitative easing. They've now printed £400 billion worth of money and pumped it into the economy. All trying to keep this one mode of money going and keeping our economy going, which, it has. There's been some problems with the way QE and monetary policy is working, but it has at least kept the economy afloat. But the other key factor in what makes an economy resilient is making a complex system resilient, is having diversity in the system. And that's what's really, really important. That's one of the big things that we've forgotten. And in the balance that we should have in economies, but so that we can have resilient economies, because resilience is a really important factor. So resilience is when you hit a system with a shock, how capable is it of bouncing back to a normal operating of the system? So it's really, really useful because shocks happen all the time. They can be either man-made shocks, they can be natural shocks, they can be all sorts. And so what we've forgotten is this idea of diversity. And diversity is so important, and that's where these kind of local flourishing initiatives can be really, really important. And so I'll give you a bit of an example to kind of hopefully make it a bit clearer in people's minds. So if you think that we have a need for food production in the economy. Now, at a hugely efficient level, which is kind of the way we do it. We have these huge monoculture farms, which are popping up everywhere. We've even seen now, I think it was just last week, kind of the arrival of these mass-scale cattle herds, and animal farming is now happening at a huge scale. And we do this because we think it's hugely efficient. But what these large-scale monocultures miss is that, in fact, they are actually very vulnerable to kind of shocks to the system. Not enough rain, the wrong kind of climatic conditions, money shocks that make money really expensive to happen. And so you get a system that's hugely efficient, but that breaks down all the time. At the other side, you can imagine something like a rainforest. A rainforest is hugely diverse, but it's going to be a struggle to kind of feed us all if we turned all of the UK into a big forest. And so what we need to do is find the right balance of diversity in our economic systems so that we can have some of the benefits of diversity and focus a bit less on efficiency. And so that's what a lot of the local initiatives do, is they increase this ability of this diversity in local economies, and what they do is they make local economies more resilient. And so in the second half, I'll try and talk through some examples of where that's come to pass and how that's kind of helped local economies. But this real push for huge efficiency has also hollowed out our local economies. So whereas we used to have lots of small and medium businesses providing services at a local level, many of these are now going, and they're being either acquired, assumed, or just disappearing in favor of these much larger structures. And this is hampering our ability to kind of reanimate our local economies. And so a really great book on this is Charles Eisenstein's Sacred Economics, who really, I think, outlines really clearly the challenges we face if we want to go to a kind of more locally sustainable economy. But the important thing is this is not inevitable. We've made choices in all of the factors that have led to this hugely centralized economy that we have. And there are a few core principles that I think that we need to start to embrace, and I think that are filtering into some of the structural institutions that we have up there. So a really important one is called subsidiarity. So subsidiarity is just the principle that a decision should always be made at the lowest level possible. So rather than now, our kind of general feeling is that all decisions should be pushed up to the top. A few key people make the decision and they push it all back down, often lacking the kind of the ability to make the decision and all the facts. And so the first thing that we need to do is really start to push those decisions down as far as possible, and this is certainly something that's happening far and wide. Then we need to really understand that we need to embrace diversity, and so diversity can be, economically speaking, less efficient. So it can cost more to do things at the local level. It can produce less results sometimes when we do things at the local level. But this shouldn't be mistaken for being not something that we should do, and hopefully some of the examples. And then finally, we really need to start empowering people. I think that, there's this real sense of disempowerment of the individual. We need to give them some more aspects of control, and some of the work that I've been doing has brought out some interesting ideas in what giving people control really means, because I don't think it's the obvious thing. So someone like myself, I'm constantly at meetings, I really want to make decisions, I want to be involved, but I know plenty of people that aren't like that. So we have to understand a bit what control means, but also giving them a stake, giving them real ownership in the economy, I think is also really important. That's what a lot of these local initiatives are trying to do. And I just want to contrast a little bit with, a theme that we had, this idea, which is a little bit reminiscent of some of that. And I think the really important factor is that as we've been so used to these really centralized structures, when that centralized power moves away, which is basically what the Conservatives tried to do in the big society, they tried to just take bits of government out of our day-to-day operation, but they didn't provide any resources back to fill it, and they just expected people just to rise up and do all the work for them. So that's absolutely not what we need to do. We need to think about a different way of achieving that kind of local economy. So, brilliant. So I've got about halfway. So I'm going to go through some of the examples. of work that I've been doing with the New Economics Foundation and others, trying to help people take back control of their kind of local economy. And so money, given that it's been a theme that the Brett and Diet have talked about, I think we'll talk about a little bit. So money has been a real factor in kind of local economies trying to take back some control. Now, it's been done with a kind of very varying degree of success. And there are a number of different types of money that people have tried to innovate here. So probably the most famous ones are the local currencies, as they're called. So in London, we've got the Brixton pound. There's also the East London pound, which I don't know if many people are aware of. But there are about 10 of these local currencies around in the UK. And the kind of the structural problem that people saw there was that if you spend £1 sterling with a multinational company, in fact, most of that money leaves your local economy straight away. And it varies, but somewhere between a third and 2/3 of that money at most will stick in that local economy. The rest just leaves your economy straight away. And so what these local economies were trying to do is how do we make this money kind of stick in our local economy and attract what we call the local multiplier effect. If you have a piece of money that's really stuck in your economy, it has to just keep circulating in your economy. And it does more than just because you can lock £1 in your local economy, it doesn't do £1 of good. It can do 5, 10, 20 pounds of good as each time it's circulated and spent. So what they did was they created this kind of money with values. And so it's a kind of money, and I'll just show you them because they're actually they can be quite pretty. It's money that sticks in your local economy. I'll just pass some of them around because often it's nice to see. So these are some notes from around the world. I'll just pass those that way. Here. If you just pass them around. So these are all pieces of money that local communities have created, and you can only spend in small and medium businesses that accept them. And then the shopkeeper, once he accepts it, he then also has to spend that in the local community. And so you get money that is literally stuck in your local economy and just keeps circulating around. So these have been around for about 5 years or so in the UK. And although they've achieved some really great things, I think what's surprising is that they haven't achieved what maybe people thought they would set out to achieve. Most people start a money project because they want to have a direct impact on the economy. They're kind of numbers-based thinkers. And in fact, the economic impact of these local forms of money have been really, really marginal. What's more exciting is that the impact that they've really had has been much more around kind of social capital, kind of these softer ideas of building a community, of building a sense of belonging, a sense of pride in your local area. And many economists kind of devalue that because I can't measure that in numbers, it's not extra economic activity. But I actually think those things are hugely, hugely valuable. And in fact, it's this social capital, which is also a really big factor in the resilience of our local economies. And so the fact that these pieces of money don't have a huge impact on our economics, but do have a huge impact on our society is, I think, a really amazing thing. But they do struggle. They are not financially sustainable. They rely on grant funding to keep going, and so they will have a natural time in which the grant funders just don't want to fund it anymore, and we need to move on. So that's why I think what's great in the kind of thinking around the blockchain and Bitcoin is thinking about how we can take some of this learning that we've done in the local currency space and how we might be able to turbocharge some of that. So one kind of company that I work with a little bit called Colu is trying to do exactly this merger. So they're trying to understand how local economies work and how transactions work, but building it on the blockchain and building a network of local communities so that it's not just one local community against the rest of the world, but it's a network of thousands of local communities, all kind of building their power collectively, but equally against this big kind of financial system. But that isn't the only type of kind of money experimentation that's going on at the local level. And I think the other really exciting one is called kind of mutual credit systems. And so these tend to be systems where lots of businesses get together and they decide to accept a kind of completely new form of token that only comes into existence at the point in which these two businesses trade with each other. So in some sense, each business becomes its own little mini central bank. So it has the power to create money, and it has the power to trade without needing the money in the first place. Now the biggest of these is in Switzerland, comprises 65,000 small and medium businesses, and does about 3 billion Swiss francs worth of trade between them. So these networks can grow to quite a big scale, and this has a demonstrable kind of resilience effect on the Swiss economy. So, and it's the only complementary currency in the whole world that is large enough to have a kind of direct macroeconomic impact. So, part of the reason why the Swiss economy is so stable is because as the Swiss franc becomes harder to get, and that could be either more expensive to borrow in terms of interest rates, or banks are just restricting their lending for some reason, businesses move into using this alternative form of money. So this is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of resilience. So as you build these local economies into scale, you can start to see businesses and actors in the economy switching from one type of thing to help them throughput one type of money into another one that becomes more easily accessible. Brilliant. 3 minutes, wow. I only got to one example. So I'm just going to talk through really quickly some of the other ones because money is definitely one of the areas. Another one is this idea of platforms. So one of the piece of work that I do a lot in the New Economics Foundation is rethinking the kind of the platform model. So platforms are everything. So much of our lives now are intermediated through these big platforms. It could be getting a taxi, going to a hotel, Facebook. All of these places are all really, really big platforms, and they all have kind of things in common. They're very extractive. They're not respectful of kind of local regulations. These gig economy platforms hugely damaging to workers' rights. And so kind of a few years, about in 2014, a US academic coined the term platform cooperative as a way to mitigate some of the worst impacts of these platforms. And so part of the project I'm doing is trying to see is whether if we relocalize some of these platforms, and so I'm working on one that will battle against Uber. So it would be a platform, instead of being owned by a few people in Silicon Valley and a bunch of venture capitalists, the platform is owned by the drivers themselves. They have control over their working conditions, and they have control over the technology. The value then is brought back into our local economy rather than, again, leaving our economy. And this is something that can easily be replicated in many of these systems. Now, some of the most rapacious systems, so the Facebooks and the Googles, it's hard to see how we're going to turn that into a kind of local platform co-op. But everything that's really based on procuring a service locally, so think Airbnb, think Uber, think Deliveroo, all of these kind of services are absolutely ripe for a kind of local version of that, where local people own it, local people manage it, and giving people real power and say in their local economy. But it's happening across, a whole range of issues. Housing is another one where, again, the local economy response to the housing crisis is a thing called the Community Land Trust. So the Community Land Trust is a really interesting vehicle whereby, so in London, the majority of the cost of a house is not the cost of the house, but it's the cost of the land. So in London, that makes up about 70 to 80% of the cost of a property that you pay is in fact the cost for the locational value of the land. And these huge increases that we see increases in house prices. House prices aren't going up, land prices are going up. So the Community Land Trust response is to take the land out of the market and give people homes at truly affordable rates forever. But again, these work at very, very small scale. There are about, I think, 4,000 homes on Community Land Trust in the UK. So that's obviously not going to solve our housing crisis, where we are down about 2 million homes on what we need here in the UK. But part of what I'm working on is how we might take that learning from Community Land Trust and build it out to be like a macro solution to the housing crisis. There are really exciting things going on in energy. The Isle of Egg, which is one of the Hebridean Islands up in Scotland, a beautiful place. First of all, they bought the land out from under them, so they off the laird who owned it. I mean, just an interesting fact, 432 people own 50% of the land in Scotland. It's one of the most unequal distributions of land anywhere in the world. But anyway, so they bought the land off their laird, but then they wanted energy independence, and so they've also now created their own wind farm on the island, which provides all the energy that they need for their local community. So that's one example of a kind of a local community really taking control, so not only owning their land, owning their energy production, and they're really doing some amazing stuff. It's an amazing place to visit, really inspirational. But it's also happening in London. So Repowering London is a really amazing organisation that basically employs local people to build solar panels and install them on top of estates here in London. And so you have one in Brixton and Vauxhall, and I'm pretty sure there are other ones around as well. And so they not only provide jobs, they relocalize energy production, they shift energy production from harmful fossil fuels into green energy, and you make a return. So it's like one of these really virtuous little initiatives, and has some real potential. And I'll probably just finish on one more, which is taking a little bit different, which is looking at the power of so these are all kind of people taking initiative. So the money one, the housing one, even the platform co-ops. This isn't the state getting involved and helping kind of relocalize the economy. This is people taking initiative, people taking the power and doing it. The other one is what's being called kind of the Preston model. I don't know if people have come across that yet. And so what Preston has been doing is really amazing. So they were really suffering in the kind of this efficiency drive, as well as the kind of the removal of kind of manufacturing jobs and all of this kind of stuff. The town was really suffering. And so what they did, modeled on actually something that was already happening in the States, was think about all the money that all the public bodies spend in Preston. And when they analysed it, they found that almost all of this money was being spent at large companies, multinationals, but almost none of the value, obviously some of the work was being done in Preston, but none of the value was actually being kept in Preston, because all these companies were owned and the money was leaving the economy. And so over the last few years, what they've done is they've kind of mapped out everything that they spend, identified firstly where they could spend it more locally in businesses already owned in Preston, but they've also identified whole areas where there was just no possibility to kind of relocalize the spending. And so it then fostered the creation of local businesses in order to do that. So be that laundry services or other things that they basically helped create in the local economy. And so I think this is, again, one of the stepping stones that we're seeing away from the individuals trying to do something on their own within the structures that the state puts in there. This is one of these amazing examples of a local authority, an arm of the state, taking that localism mantle themselves and actually doing something really positive. So I have a few more, but yeah, maybe we can move to some questions and discussion.